Hello, everyone. Get on your snuggies. Get all wrapped up and bundled up. You excited? You ready to learn? Because this is the game designer and developer for Freezer 700, bringing it in the World of Nosgoth tabletop RPG. Now, the World of Nosgoth table RPG is all created from scratch. There is no influence of D&D, Rogue Trader, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, nothing. No Baldur's Gate 3, so everything you brought to the table from other games, other role-playing games, may not be applicable here. I've played a wide variety of things: Vampire the Masquerade, Baldur's Gate 3, Baldur's Gate 1. I've played a lot. Pathfinder. There's been a lot of interesting settings out there, and there's been a lot of interesting role-playing games for tabletop. And the one issue I've always had with them is that they all kind of get jumbled up into the same category. Some of them are very unique, like Vampire the Masquerade, very different than the other stuff. But a lot of times they all have the same issue, which is that they're too complicated. It's hard to get into them. You spend 3 hours and you haven't even created a character yet because there's so much to get into. So today's video is a tutorial on how to play this game. Very simple. I made it very easy for everyone. So therefore, when it comes to creating a character, you literally just got to do one thing and then you're done. You just get right into it. So let's go over it. This is the official website, World of Nosgoth Tabletop RPG. You go to sites.google.com/view/World of Nosgoth/home. Here's a little description for those of you who do not know Legacy of Kain. And here's a little excerpt of why you should play. The game is very asymmetric between the three races, so for this video alone, we're going to talk only about the vampires. There is the humans and the Hilden, but we don't want to muddy the waters. We just want to stay just on the vampires for today. Now, if you are just a new player, and you're joining a group of friends and you're playing this game, I would recommend just the Rules Light page. If you just click here, Rules Light has your table modifier, an example of how stats work along with a chart. We're going to get into what all these numbers mean, but just know that Rules Light page is more for just the player, and that's really all it's meant for. If you're a game master, though, I would recommend that if you're running a campaign or creating a campaign, you just do the codexes. So we're going to click on the link. Here we are, that beautiful image, and of course the codex. So from here, pro tip, hit Control F and you'll pop up a little search bar. You can type in clans and it tells you there's 10 words that say clans on this page. You can go up and down and find what you're looking for, and boom, we got the big clan section, just in case you wanted a faster way of searching through things. So with that being said, let's first talk about how this game works. So this game works with a 2d6 system. So that means 2 6-sided dice. If you want, bring more dice. More the merrier. Makes it easier. That way you don't have to go passing it around. But there are modifiers to this game, and there's certain words that impact those modifiers. For instance, if someone says something has a higher chance, that means it has a +2 modifier or a -2 modifier. This means if I have a higher chance to succeed, I get a +2 modifier to something. This could be something like, oh, you have a +2 modifier to catching a rabbit because I'm faster than it. Okay, so then that means I get the +2 results. Of course, this could be influenced by other things. This can be influenced by, let's say, I'm already incredibly fast. So this +2 would actually be a +3. It's up to you. So either way, I just wanted you to keep that in your background. Just know that anytime someone says that, that's what they're talking about. Here's the charts. This more or less goes over what constitutes a crit fail versus a pass, and a crit success. As you can tell, as 0 modifier, this is no issue whatsoever. You can crit fail at a 2 or a 3, and if you crit fail, It's up to the GM what happens to you. But hopefully, God has mercy. If you fail, it's just a 4 or 6. You just didn't succeed. No biggie. A pass is 7 to 11. And a critical is a 12. Always, always, always criticals are amazing. You may be looking into someone's pockets for money and you may end up crit succeeding, and your game master says not only did you find money, but you found a letter to a deed of a house, so now you're the owner of a house. Congratulations. You never know what can happen in this game. And of course, for you game masters out there who are designing campaigns, just keep that in mind that nothing is really set in stone. You can do whatever you want. And you can always have these terms in your pocket. So let's say, for instance, I am trying to attack somebody and I'm really, really good with a sword to the point that I have a +3 modifier with it. Well, I have a +3, I cannot crit fail. And if I do fail, it would mean I rolled a 2 or a 3, which isn't even a miss because I have a +3 modifier. I'm so good that even when I roll a bad roll, I still hit you, but my damage is reduced by 4 damage. Now, if I am outside of combat, let's say I'm trying to rob somebody, and I have really high cunning, and I'm really charismatic, and I roll a 3. Well, if I roll a 3, I can re-roll to try to salvage the mistake. If I roll a 2, though, I just failed. That's it. Not a crit fail, just a fail. This is why having such a huge modifier is so important. Now, of course, if you land a 10 to a 12, you not only crit hit, you get a legendary hit. So if I did damage to somebody, I roll 1d6 to determine extra damage done. So if I hit you with a legendary strike, I roll 1d6, and if it's a 2, that means I get +2 damage to the damage that I'm dealing to you. They may say, what does crit success give then to the other rolls? If I crit succeed at a -1, what do I get? Well, crit success, you allow the player to get a second action or movement and +2 damage to attacks. So, in other words, if I attack an enemy, I could decide, actually I want to roll a 1d6 and run away from this opponent. Okay. Or I crit success and say, you know what, I just hit him. I'm going to hit him again. And you can do that again. You would have to roll a separate roll, though. So for that second hit, you could crit fail. I'm not joking. I've seen players do it before where they crit succeeded and then followed it up with a crit fail. So always be careful with your modifiers, kids. Besides that, though, what are stats and skills? After all, these modifiers are really interesting, and you can see that even if you're good at something, you can still fail rather badly at it. So what constitutes these modifiers? Where are the stats and where are the skills that are behind these? So let's scroll down. Here are your stats: strength, perception, intelligence, charisma, and endurance. 5 stats. Strength is how strong you are. 1 strength equals 2 inventory slots. So if you want to be the pack mule who carries all this stuff, you would need higher strength. Perception is how well you can see, hear, touch things in the world, helping you find secrets and weaknesses. With perception, you can actually roll a perception check and see a naked spot inside an enemy's armor, which means that when you attack them, you get through their armor. They don't reduce the damage because you negated their armor entirely. That could be very cunning. Perception can also help you with things like finding secrets or dodging. Someone attacks you, you can roll perception to hopefully dodge. Intelligence determines your use of magic. It also increases your chance to build or craft items. If you want to be the scientist who creates bombs or creates all sorts of amazing contraptions, you would need intelligence. And as a vampire, you get access to flesh crafting, specifically the Melkahim. And that scales off of intelligence. So if you want to make a third arm onto your character by ripping the arm off of a vampire, you would need to pass an intelligence check. Now, intelligence is also very useful because intelligence gives you your runes. Now, you may say, what is a rune? Rune is your mana, that's your magic pool. So, if you want to cast magic spells or techniques, you would need higher intelligence. So, let's look at our magic spells. Magic spells in the game are strictly tied to the species that they're associated with. In this case, it is the vampires. As it says here, summoned creatures are leveled to the level of the summoner. Summoned creatures will die after combat, and if summoned more creatures, or after 4 turns. So if I summoned 2 skeletons, and then I said, oh, let me summon another 2 skeletons, then that means the 2 original skeletons I had will just fade away. And all I did is replace them with new ones. Or after 4 turns of combat, they just wither away and go away. Magic is listed in categories. As you can see, there's necromancy, in which case we have Call of the Crypt, which allows you to summon 2 skeletons to fight for you. And it gives you their stats. But it tells you here that there's a requirement to casting this spell, which is 8. Now, the nice thing about vampires, other species cannot cast spells if they don't meet the requirements. Vampires can cast spells if they don't meet the requirements. So in this case, if I did have 8 intelligence, I would just need to roll a 4 or higher with 2 dice to succeed. That's all it takes. If I didn't have 8 intelligence and I casted Call of the Crypt, I would need to roll an 8 or higher to cast. Some spells in the Vampire Codex are strict, where they say if you don't have this requirement, you can't cast it. But most of the vampire magics you can cast even if you don't meet their requirements, which makes them a lot more versatile, and that's why vampires are regarded as easier for the players to get into. Now, of course, just because you don't meet the requirements doesn't mean that you won't suffer. If you roll crit fail, for example, some of these things can hurt you really badly. Like just failing to cast Call of the Crypt and you don't meet the requirements results in 2 damage to yourself. Crit fail results in 2 hostile skeletons being summoned. That can be really bad. Besides necromancy, you also have mind magic as a vampire, so you can read people's thoughts. And as you can see, the requirements here for Read Like a Book is 3 magic skill or 7 perception. So if I didn't have 7 perception, but I had 3 magic skill, I could cast this with this dice modifier roll. If I didn't have either of these, then I would just have to go by the not meeting requirements roll. There's a few other mind spells here, like, of course, Depression, which inflicts the target with sadness. It makes them do half damage for 2 turns. And you see here, it's restricted based on a clan requirement, so I have to be a Zephanim to cast this, or a class requirement. I have to be a Deceiver. And there is no way I can cast this if I don't meet these requirements. These are spells that are regarded as specialties. Lastly, we have Energy Magic and Blood Magic. Energy Magic is more versatile, and it's been regarded as more of a beginner mage's energy spell booklet. Just because if you're a beginner magic caster, Energy Bolt is very cheap, and of course it does really well. Just 2 magic skill and 5 intelligence to cast. Very simple, does plenty of damage, keeps you running in the game. The only downside with Energy Magic is that Energy Magic is blocked by armor. So here I am hurling energy bolts, but armor protects them just the same as if it was a sword blow. Shield, I could cast a shield on myself with energy, and then more crazy spells later on. I'm going to leave it up to you, the players, to read these, but just know that the last magic is Blood Magic. Blood Magic is just like Mind Magic in a sense that it ignores armor. So here you are, the tankiest piece of bread out there. Doesn't matter. With Blood Magic and Mind Magic, I am hitting you directly. This is where vampires get very easy, is the fact that they have so many spells to get around armor. So this makes it where in the later stages of the game, a vampire could simply just see a guy who's bricked up like a wall, and then just suck his blood out of his armor, and makes it where his entire gear was useless. Of course, that's a rare situation, but I'm just giving an example of how strong vampires can be. There are some spells in here like Flay, where you just cleanse the blood off of someone's body. And here you could see that, unlike the previous magics we talked about, blood magic requires charisma or endurance to cast, not intelligence, not magic skill, but instead endurance or charisma. So who knows? You could play as this Ttrpg mind sorcerer or this Ttrpg blood mage who's simply siphoning the blood out of people while you're tanking damage. It's sort of interesting to look at because some of these require magic skills with high charisma, and some of them just require HP to cast, like Coagulate. But you see, Coagulate requires you to be a Ttrpg or a Sentinel. And Coagulate simply makes it where you turn your blood into armor, which is crazy. So there's a lot of cool things you could do here with intelligence. So you may say, okay, I might go intelligence, but what's techniques? Techniques is useful for when you're a warrior. Now, techniques are mostly strength-based, and as you can see here, there are vampire techniques, human techniques, Hilden techniques. And then all down here, we have different weapon-type techniques. If you're using a gun, you get different weapon techniques that a crossbow does not have. And techniques are usually strictly tied to strength stat. So by having a high strength, you can cast techniques. Now you may say, well, what about perception? Well, as I talked about earlier, perception allows you to ignore armor. So to balance out strength warriors versus perception warriors, strength warriors get techniques. Some of them are very interesting. Like as a vampire only technique, you get Fury, which means that you must have 6 strength and 5 melee or 5 melee proficiency to use. And what happens is you hit a target so hard that you send them flying across the room. And if they hit the wall, they take an additional 4 damage. There's a few other things here that are really interesting. Like you can always do What Stalks the Night, where you must have 8 cunning to cast or 8 strength, either one. And you basically fly across the room and pounce the enemy target. Each one of these has their own stuff going on with them. Like this one, Blood Rush, you must be a Ttrpg or a Tyrant to cast, where you basically charge into people and you beat them up really, really badly. As I said, most techniques require some sort of strength requirement, but in the end, there are also staff techniques, and these are useful for, again, intelligence, if you're going to be a mage. And these staff techniques are based on what kind of staff you're using. If you're using a lightning staff, you get access to Teslic Burst, where you spend 8 runes and you summon a ball of cackling energy. You can also have a blood staff and do Crimson Stroke, where you sling blood across the floor. But here's one like Spear Thrust. You cast 5 runes and you make a jab at somebody. You must have 6 strength to cast and must be within 3 tiles of the target. Interesting. And you pull them forward a tile. Next we have Charisma, which Charisma is very useful because you can access battle shouts. Now with Charisma you can charm people, you can charm shopkeepers, and as the game master you're going to decide how much this Charisma is going to affect things. As a game master, I may say that every modifier to your charisma is a percentage of reduced or increased gold cost of your items. So if you have a +1 charisma, that's 10% reduced gold cost for your items when you buy items and sell items. Or you could do it any other way differently. You could say, it's just -1 gold, -2 gold. Or you may even make players make charisma checks, where you say, okay, your charisma is +1, so roll a +1 modifier to use it. Charisma also has access to battle shouts. Battle shouts are basically war cries. So, for example, there's 3 of them: offense, defense, and utility. Offensive are legendary Vae Victus. You cast it, and it makes it where if you succeed, you do an additional 2 damage to your attacks. That could be very, very useful. Then there's others like defensive, like Brutus Fulmin. You lower the damage of the target when attacked by your charisma stat. So in this case, if you have 8 charisma, you're reducing the damage by 4 because it's charisma divided by 2. So that could be a lifesaver. Lastly, we have utility, which is Aru, Aru. What is your profession, Spartan? Gives +1 modifier to all martial attacks this turn. If an ally has a +3 modifier higher, then they just receive +2 damage instead of their +1 mod. But you see, it requires something extra with their charisma, which is a +4 martial skill. There's a lot of cool things you can do with each individual stat in this game, and there's a lot of cool skills that come with them. Endurance is simply put how much HP you get. Endurance, though, is based on level, more or less. So if you're higher level, you'll have more HP per endurance. But we'll go over that later. Let's talk about skills. There is melee, melee proficiency, ranged proficiency, magic, and cunning. Cunning, I'm going to start with at the bottom and work my way up, because cunning I feel is the most complicated. But cunning is usually when you do underhanded tactics, backstabbing, or manipulating. So it's somewhat a weapon skill, but it's also a bit more than that. You can do cunning attacks with just about any weapon type, except for staffs. Now, when you make a cunning attack, it can be a perception or a strength. It isn't necessarily one or the other. Magic. Magic is your energy spells, magic spells, and your staff. If you're using a staff, you're going to need the magic skill to be a little higher because you'll increase the damage. Range proficiency is your bows, your bombs. So when you throw a bomb, you need high range proficiency. Javelins, any object that's thrown, crossbows, guns, whatever. Can be perception or strength as well. So depending how hard you're hitting someone with your strength, you could increase the damage of the bow, or you could decide to do a perception, where again, you choose what stats you combine with what skills. Lastly, we have our melee proficiency and melee. Humans do not get melee. I'm just saying that right now. But melee proficiency is your swords, axes, maces, spears, shields, clubs, whips, etc. Can be perception or strength. Melee attacks, which is just you using your claws or just beating someone up with your fist, these are strictly strength. Strength only. Hilden have this as well, and it is the exact same. So if you're going for certain character builds, you may want to consider this. Now, we just talked about a lot of stuff. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. How exactly do you make a character then? Well, making a character is very simple. Let's go down here. It's literally one sentence. How bad is it? It's not. So, character creation. Creating a character. Everyone has a starting stat of 5, unless specified by a clan trait. Players are allowed to put 1 point into a stat, or take a trait for -1 stat. If they decide to be weird and they take a negative trait, then they get +2 to a stat. So let's do that. Let's create a character. So here we have our clans. You could decide, you know what, I don't know what clan to choose, so let me go to the Pillars of Nosgoth and ask for my fate to be decided. In which case you answer 9 questions and you tally up your results. And if you get your results to be equal somehow, some way, I don't know how you would do it, but if you do, then you can ask your game master and maybe he'll throw you an extra question. Or maybe he'll do something different like choose for you. Or you could just decide amongst the equal pairing which one you prefer. Either way, let's go back to character creation. We have our Razielums, so let's look at what they look like. Razielums. Level 0, everyone starts at level 0. You have 10 HP because your endurance is 5. 10 runes because your intelligence is 5. 0 XP out of 20. So here we have it. 5 in every stat except for charisma. +1 modifier, +1. Why is there charisma a 7? Well, let's look at our codex. They get +2 charisma and they suffer -2 wounds from fire attacks. Okay. So if I accidentally step into a fire, instead of taking 4 damage from being weak to fire, I instead suffer 2 damage. That's nice. But I have a higher chance of failing cunning attempts. And even down here it says it. 1 skill in cunning is equal to -4 cunning. Oh, okay. Charisma bonus does not apply when engaging with other Razielums. Oh, okay. So this +1 charisma is actually a 0 when I talk to another Razielum. And this cunning skill is -2. Huh. It's not impossible for me to go down cunning and become some sort of assassin or backstabbing Razielum, but it would be a little bit of a challenge to climb up this modifier, to climb over this hill. And as you can see, my charisma is 7. So I want to edit this sheet. So let me copy it. Control C. Go to my sheet. Control V to paste it. Cool, now I can modify it. So earlier it said I just need to put a stat point. So let's do that. I want to go down charisma. So let me change that to 8. Well, because I changed that to 8, that gives me a +2 modifier. And voila, we're done. You just created a character. You're done. I have played so many games where it takes 3 hours minimum just to create a character. Now you may say, whoa, Freezer, that was fast. We're done already? Yeah, that is it. Let's create another character. So here we have our Doomahim. Let's check them out. So Doomahim, 10 HP, 10 runes, 5 in all stats. Really? Okay, well let's look at their skills. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay. Oh, they have 0 modifier. And it says clan trait. Let's read this. Doomahim, versatile in combat and proficient in weapons. They get +4 weapon proficiency, and you can select whether it's ranged or melee. No penalty for using other skills except for magic and cunning. Oh, so even though I have no skill in my ranged, I can still use it with a 0 modifier. I don't suffer penalties like my magic and my cunning do. So let's copy this and let's paste it. As always, the Doomahim wipe out the Razielum. There's nothing that I can do about that. So with my Doomahim, I can just simply go, okay, let's go strength. So now I have 6, which is +1, +1 mod. And now I get to have +4 to a skill of my choice. I'm going to go down melee proficiency. So now it's 5. Now 5 gives me 0 mod. And in case you forget, you can always come down here and look at your modifier chart. Your modifier chart shows you what these skills and stats equal. So if I have a 0 to 1, I suffer a -2 mod. If I have a 2 to 3, I have a -1. 4 and 5 is 0. 6 and 7 is +1. Here it goes on and so forth. Now, I will say this. It is stated earlier. Stats cannot be 0. If your stat ever equals to 0, you are dead. The reason why is because, well, if I have 0 charisma, that means the decay and the rot has consumed my soul, and my face will just melt off and I will crumble to dust. If I have 0 endurance, well, I think that's pretty obvious. You'll have 0 HP. And 0 strength and 0 perception is much the same, where you're too weak, you're too brittle, you can't hear anything, you can't move, you are immobile, you're stuck. You literally cannot do anything. You just die. But either way, we made our Doomahim character. Let's name him Grula. So, Grula, there he is. Now, looking at our character sheet, we may have noticed that, well, his stats aren't really anything that's amazing, and his weapon effects are kind of not amazing either. So how do I go about leveling this, my XP, from 0 to 20? How do I level up? Because I'm level 0. Well, the only way to upgrade your stats and your skills is to level up. So killing enemies and drinking their blood is the surest way of gaining levels and experience. Killing an enemy gives 2 points of XP. Drinking all of their blood gives 3 XP. If you are a fledgling vampire, you get 5 XP for drinking the blood of your enemies. To level up, you need a total of 20 XP. This does not change no matter how leveled you get, as enemies in Nosgoth are difficult to fight no matter the level. There is a level cap of 8. Each level up gives you 1 skill point. Every 2 level ups give you 1 stat point. That's interesting. So if I say I'm level 1, that means I can increase my melee proficiency to 6, which would give me that +1 mod, don't forget. And that's it. I'm done leveling. Now, what if I hit level 2? What happens then? Well, level 2, I can increase my melee proficiency to 7, which is still a +1 mod. But now at level 2, I can increase a stat of my choice. And I may say, you know what, 10 HP, it's not really working out for me. Let me bring this up to 6, which gives me a +1 mod, +1 mod. And now I have 12 HP. This is looking better. Now I'm going to survive this world. As you may have guessed, if the max level is 8, then that means you only get 4 stat points total. So you could spread out your stat points, and even then you wouldn't be able to get every single stat into the 6th level, because one of these would be hanging out to dry. Or you could decide to double down and just put all your stats into one single stat. But level 8 gives you 8 skill points. That is a lot of skill points, and as a Doomahim, I already start with a lot of skill in my melee proficiency. I could just be a one-trick pony and just go straight up strength and straight up melee proficiency. Hit them hard, hit them fast, get a ridiculous like +10 modifier. The only downside to that is that being a one-trick pony comes with its own downsides of, what if I'm on a mission that requires a bit of charisma? What if I'm on a mission where it involves solving a riddle and I need higher intelligence? What if I'm on a mission where I didn't see the trap that was before me and now I just took a massive amount of damage? What if my tank is down and he needs healing? Now I'm the tank and I don't have enough endurance to really survive. These are all scenarios that could happen in your campaigns. And these are all things that you have to worry about as you play the game. World of Nosgoth is brutal. It's dangerous. And while it is easy to create a character, it is easy to lose a character. So let's reset the dial back to 0. So, items in inventory. Let's talk about that. Items in inventory is where I see a lot of people get kind of confused. So we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth. but let's keep it kind of simple. So there are quality values to the items that you gather. There is leather, iron, steel, dark renaissance steel, and glyph. Glyph, vampires cannot use. Humans in Hilden can use glyph gear. Vampires cannot. But glyph is very equivalent to dark renaissance steel. There are differences, obviously, but for sake of argument, we're just going to stay with dark renaissance steel is pretty much equal to glyph. Now, as you can see here on this chart, leather armor provides you with 0 armor, but you get -1 wounds from environments, bombs, traps, and magical attacks per piece. So if I'm wearing a full set of leather gear, I'm reducing it by mostly 5 damage. Now, if you are wearing a full set of leather armor, you can gain armor value based on your perception divided by 2. So if I have 10 perception, that gives me 5 armor. That's really not as valuable as it sounds, but the one nice thing is that it doubles the value of my reduction of wounds from environments. So if I'm wearing a full suit of leather armor, that doesn't reduce the damage by 5, that reduces it by 10. Now in World of Nosgoth, the way it works is if I step on a trap and it does 4 damage, and I'm wearing 4 leather pieces, instead of it doing 0 damage, it would just do 1. Everything resets to just 1. There are a few spells in the game and there are a few items in the game that do negate damage entirely, but most of the time in the world, you will still take 1 tick of damage. And 1 HP is really not much when you get into the later stages of the game, but 1 HP feels devastating at the early stages of the game. Iron armor and weapons deal 1 damage and protect 1 armor. Steel gives you 2 armor and gives you 2 damage. Dark Renaissance steel is 3 armor, 3 damage per piece. So, what does that look like? So here is your character's pieces of inventory. You have a helmet, a chest piece, gloves, pants, and boots. 5 pieces total. You also have jewelry that you can wear. A circlet, could be a headband, 2 earrings, 2 rings, and a necklace. 1, 3, 5, 6. 6 plus 5 is 11. So that means you have 11 things that you can wear at any point in time in the game. The way armor is calculated when it comes to damage is pretty simple. Armor value. If I am wearing a full set of iron gear, then I'm going to have 5 armor. That means that my armor value is 5 divided by 2, which equals 2 damage reduction. Now you may say, but 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. I get that. In the world of Nosgoth, everything is reduced down. Everything will be rounded accordingly to that. So if I have 3.89, doesn't matter. It is 3. If you have 2.6, it is 2. Everything is rounded down. Until you hit the next number, it will stay the whole number. So 2.5 is rounded down to 2. So that means if I get hit by 10 damage, I take only 8 damage. Spears, flails, great swords, warhammers, great axes have an attack range of 2 squares and deal 2 extra damage. Iron sword, that's one-handed, does 1 damage. An iron greatsword does 3 damage. Swords, axes, maces, and fists have an attack range of 1, and if the player is dual wielding, they receive a -2 modifier to all attacks and get -4 damage reduction. As you can see, bows have their attack range of 6 squares. Crossbows have an attack range of 4 squares with a +2 damage. Guns can only be used by humans, so we're not even going to talk about it. Crossbows can be dual wielded for the same penalty. Staffs have a cooldown of 1 turn and attack range of 5 tiles. Sun damage, poison damage, and blood damage ignore armor. Cannot be dual wielded. Shields make an endurance or strength check possible. And if you pass, you reduce the damage by endurance divided by 2 or strength divided by 2. Can only be done once per turn. So, all that stuff I just threw at you, what does that mean? Well, quite simple. Damage. So the way damage calculation works in this game is you roll the dice based on your modifier. So with a +1 mod and a 0, that means I roll dice on a +1. And as always, you can look at your modifier chart. So with a +1 mod, I rolled a 7, which is a pass. If I rolled a 6, I would have passed as well. I'm going to deal damage based on my strength and my melee proficiency with an iron sword. So that means 6 divided by 2 plus 5 divided by 2 plus 1 because I'm using an iron sword, which is going to equal 3 plus 2, which is 5, plus 1. So I'm doing 6 damage total. Now, if an enemy has iron armor, the same setup I have, that means they take 4 damage as it is reduced by 2 from their armor. Now, what if I have a claymore, though? Well, if I have a claymore, I can attack at a farther distance, so I'm a little safer. But also, you're going to increase your damage accordingly. Like, 3 plus 3 would be 6, and plus 2 would be 8 damage. That is a huge increase from 6. And while the enemy may reduce it by 2, he's going to take 6 damage instead of 4. Let's show some gameplay and then we'll make this all piece together. So this is how combat works. This is Grula, our character we made just now. 6 strength with 5 melee proficiency. Down here, we have our pitiful, lowly human meat shield slave who is going to get beaten ridiculously. So the way combat works is that whoever has the highest perception goes first. The human has 4 perception. I have 5 perception. So because I have 5 perception, I go first. So, starting off the game, I'm going to roll the dice. I'm going to roll 1d6. So a single dice. So that way I can determine how far do I move. I roll 2. So rolling a 2, that means that I can move 2 tiles. 1, 2. I am using just a great sword. So by moving 2 tiles, I'm going to stand here. And I am exactly 2 tiles away, which means I am in range to hit him. If anyone was in range, I could hit him. Before I hit him, I can also look at techniques. So let us go to our techniques. Control F, sword, and let's go down. And here we have a few sword techniques. Audentis Fortuna, 5 runes. Must attack a target with more than 60% HP. Target takes damage target calculation with 20% of their max HP as damage. Must roll with a -2 modifier in any chosen stat with skill. Fail results in normal damage. I mean, I have 10 runes, so may as well cast it, right? Let's do it. -2 mod, I have a +1 mod, so I'm only rolling off of a -1. If we go all the way up to our modifier chart, a -1 means I need an 8 to pass. Okay, well, let's roll the dice. 8 exactly. So that means I do my normal damage calculation, which is 8 damage, because I have an iron greatsword. The enemy is covered head to toe in iron armor, so he reduces it to 6. But Audentis Fortuna, which costed me 5 runes, gives me 20% of his HP pool. Which is 1 extra damage. So 20% of 8 is 1.6. That gives me 1 extra damage. So I do 9 damage minus 2. So he takes 7 damage. Already, our turn is ended. And the enemy is battered and bruised. Turn is over. It's the enemy's turn now. He can strike us. He does the same thing. So he's going to roll the dice to move 4 tiles. He's going to just close the gap. And he's going to roll 2d6 to just attack me. That's all he's going to do, is just attack. No techniques. A 3, he critically fails. He kills himself. Amazing. He accidentally hit himself in the head with his flail. That's awesome. And just like that, you just experience combat in this game and why it's so important. But let's do things a little differently. Let us reset. Combat begins. Grula has higher perception, so he goes first. He rolls. He gets 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And I'm still within striking distance. Grula is next to him. And Grula decides I'm just going to attack him with just my greatsword and that's it. So I'm going to roll 2d6, a 5. Now Grula has a +1 modifier. So we're going to look at our chart. +1, a 5 is a fail. So because we failed to attack, our turn is ended. It's the enemy's turn. The enemy rolls his 1d6. He gets 1 movement, so he gets 1 little tile plop. An 8, that succeeds. So he is going to do 4 strength plus his skill of 4 plus 1 damage. So that's going to be 2 plus 2 plus 1. 5 damage total. I have 5 armor. That means I'm going to reduce it by 2. So I take 3 damage. That puts me at 7 HP. Not looking good this game. So it's my turn. I could run away. So let me roll 1d6. I get 1 tile. So I'll back up 1 space. Since I'm using a greatsword, I can still hit him because he's within the 2 tile range. Now, Grula, being relatively average and being a vampire and all that, I can do a number of things. I could do a perception check. I have a 0 modifier. I roll a 10, so I pass. I see a gap in his armor, so I could make an attack with my sword and ignore his armor and do a whopping 8 damage to instantly kill this human peon. Or I could also do battle shouts. I do have 5 charisma, so I could look at my shouts and say, okay, well, I can do Ve Victus, which requires 5 charisma, and it says I need to roll a 5 to cast. Okay, let's roll 2d6. I rolled a 6, so I get Ve Victus, which increases my damage by +2. I could have done a number of things here to end this battle. One of the nicer things too as a vampire is I could have also casted magic despite not meeting the requirements. For example, I could have done Call of the Crypts. Since I don't have 8 intelligence, I just need to roll an 8 to cast it. So all I would have to do is roll 2d6. I got a 5, so I took 2 damage trying to cast a spell because I did not meet its requirements. These are all things in your tools and dispense in your disposal. Combat can get much, much crazier and much more ridiculous depending on the situation. So let's try playing as something different. Let's try showing magic, how that works when you use a staff. So we're going to make our little character sheet. We're going to go over to our characters. I'm going to do Melkahim. Yeah. I'm going to copy this. Paste it. And now I get to choose a stat point that I'm going to increase. I'm going to increase my intelligence to 8, which gives me a +2 mod. And just like that, I now have 14 runes. As a Melkahim, I'm really good with magic. And my name's going to be Oligok. With a magic proficiency of 1, I get a -2. But because my intelligence is 8, I get a +2. So I get a 0 mod. Now, wielding an iron staff, I have +1 damage with the staff. And I can cast it because he's within 4 tile range. If he was 6 tiles, I would be unable to attack him with my staff. So, beginning of my turn, I decide I'm not going to move. I'm just going to roll the dice and attack him with my staff. By doing so, I forego my movement. So let's roll 2d6. A 9. That goes through. And it turns out my staff is an energy staff, so I'm just electrocuting him right now. Zap. I'm going to do, let's look at our character stats. 8, which is 8 divided by 2, plus 1 divided by 2, plus 1 equals. So we're going to have 4 plus 1, because 2 divided by 1 is just 1. There is no 0 for this when it comes to damages. And then plus another 1. So that means 6 damage total. And because it's an energy staff, it does not ignore armor. That means I am doing 6 damage. He's wearing full iron, so he reduces it, and now he's down to 4 HP. My staff is on cooldown, so that means I can't cast it next turn. It's the enemy's turn. He rolls. He rolls a 2. He's unable to get to me. That's fine. It's my turn. I'm going to cast a spell. I'm going to cast Call of the Crypt. 6 runes. Okay. 8. I succeeded. Now I take -6 runes. I'm at 8 runes now. And I summon a bunch of skeletons. It is the enemy's turn. Because, mind you, as a skeleton, they have 3 perception. He has 4, so it's still his turn. He moves 1 dice. And now he attacks. 8. He hits the skeleton. Skeleton has 6 HP. He does a whopping 5 damage. So that's going to reduce it to 1 HP on the skeleton. It is now my turn, because the skeletons will just say that they missed. When it is the beginning of my turn, I regenerate 1 rune, so now I am at 9. My staff is now available. So from here, I can end the combat in a number of ways. I could cast another spell, I could do a number of things, but let's say for the sake of argument, he is dead. Once combat is over, my summoned creatures go away, because there's no way to keep them, unfortunately. Goodbye, skellies. And now from here, I can drink his blood. Let's say he gave me a good beating before he died. I had 2 HP left. My runes will automatically regenerate the moment combat ends, but my HP will not. HP is regained upon drinking blood. I gained 2 XP for killing him, but as a fledgling vampire, I'm going to gain 5 XP if I drink his blood. So let me do that. As I drink his blood, I heal. But how much health do you get? Well, you're going to have to go to your Hemomancy. Vampires and humans drop red blood. Drinked heals a vampire based on half of the HP of the body. Okay. So that means if he's got 8 HP, I'm going to heal for 4. So that's going to put me at 6 HP. Didn't really top off my my pint, but it's something to keep me moving. So now I can move on. I could also try to salvage by using my intelligence. I could try to salvage blood vials from him. Each corpse gives 1 blood vial. Okay. Heals for half HP of the drinker. Okay. So if I had somehow utilized this and drained the blood from his body into a blood vial, instead of healing 4 HP, I would have healed 5 HP, which would have healed me up to 7 out of 10. Little bit better, and as you can tell, as you get higher up in the levels, it would be possibly more viable to just harvest their blood rather than just drink it raw and unfiltered. But besides that, that has been the combat of the game. And congratulations, you now know how to play World of Nosgoth. There will be instances like, let's say an earthquake happens. Oh no, every player do a strength check. Okay, roll strength. I have a 0 modifier and I rolled a 10. I succeeded. This game is incredibly easy to play, and this is the reason why I think people should be playing this. Is because as far as RPGs are concerned, it's very easy to get into it. Your character dies. Oh no, what do? Create a new character. It's easy to create a new character. The only problem is that, of course, what happens if your character died at the maximum level and you had all these traits, all these clan recognitions, all this amazing heraldry? Unfortunate. There are ways to come back from death, and that would be the spirit realm. But if your soul is destroyed or your body is destroyed, then it's game over for your character. Unfortunately, I know. Immortality is not exactly eternal. There are many, many ways of playing. There's many, many ways of getting around obstacles. Just because an obstacle requires charisma doesn't mean you can't somehow manipulate the situation to involve something different. After all, if someone won't give you what you want, maybe you could do an intelligence check to realize that, hey, someone nearby keeps eyeing him. Maybe he can do something for you. Maybe you can roll a strength check with your melee proficiency and twirl your dagger in front of his face to intimidate him. Who knows? There's a lot of ways you can manipulate this game, and because of its rather simplicity, there are many ways that you can create campaigns for players. There are one-shot campaigns available under the homepage if you go under one-shot. There are many, many campaigns I am making and producing. The maps are free. You can download the maps. You open this up, and there, boom, it just gave me a map. Here you go. Here's the map of the tutorial area I was just playing. You want the actual script as the game master? That's all you gotta do is just click the link. Tells you recommended levels, recommended player counts, gives you a quick little description, and then it tells you GM eyes only. And it tells you how to play your game. Besides that, this has been Freezer700. I am out. I hope you players enjoy, and always comment down below if there's something that's confusing you, if there's something that's bothering you, or if there's something that you really love about this that you don't see in other RPGs. I'm a player myself. I really hate seeing an RPG game that looks cool, but it takes me like 4 hours just to create a character because there's so many rules to go through, so many pages to go dive into. And then the way things are calculated is very weird and obscure, like rolling a 100-sided dice to figure something out. That's a lot of probabilities that can happen. There's a lot of ways of calculating that, or calculating trajectories and such. I find this game very simple, but very complicated. Easy to pick up, difficult to master. Once you hit the max level of 8, the game's not over. You still have classes to pick. There are classes that you get at level 4. There are advanced classes you get at level 8. And then, not only that, you have traits to gain. Just because you're some amazing wizard who has high intelligence doesn't mean you're the best wizard around. Here comes a wizard who has thick skin trait, so he has more HP than you because he has a trait, and he survives a fight with you only because of that. Here comes some sort of warrior who's got frenzy trait, and because he's got the frenzy trait, he can dual wield with no penalty. So that means he is clobbering you with 2 weapons at a time. That can be very scary, that can be very deadly. So besides that,